Close your eyes and imagine, if you will, standing in the Valley of the Kings on a November morning in 1922. The desert air is crisp and filled with anticipation. The golden sands stretch endlessly under an azure sky, holding secrets that have slumbered for over 3 millennia. This is where our story begins, not with the birth of a pharaoh, but with the moment when the modern world first glimpsed into eternity itself. For nearly a century, archaeologists had been drawn to this desolate valley like moths to flame, searching for the undisturbed tomb of a pharaoh. Most had been disappointed, finding only empty chambers ransacked by ancient thieves. But on this particular morning, as the sun painted the limestone cliffs in shades of amber and rose, history was about to unveil one of its most jealously guarded secrets. The discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb would ignite imaginations across the globe, spawning tales of curses and hidden treasures, of boy kings and forgotten mysteries. But the real story, the one we're about to embark upon together, is far more extraordinary than any curse could ever be. It's a story that weaves together archaeology and astronomy, politics and poetry, death and rebirth in ways that continue to astound us today. Tonight, we'll journey deep into the heart of ancient Egypt, following clues that have puzzled scholars for generations. We'll explore chambers where golden artifacts whisper of divine kingship, where mysterious daggers forged from meteorites speak of cosmic connections, and where hidden rooms may still harbor secrets waiting to be unveiled. This is not just the story of a tomb, but the story of a civilization that achieved immortality not through mummification, but through the enduring power of mystery itself. So settle in, dear listeners, as we descend into the depths of the earth to uncover the secrets lurking in King Tut's tomb, secrets that continue to rewrite our understanding of one of history's greatest civilizations. Before we can understand the mysteries surrounding Tutankhamun's tomb, we must first understand the extraordinary circumstances that brought a mere boy to the throne of the most powerful empire on Earth. Our story begins not in the Valley of the Kings, but in the opulent palaces of Amarna, during one of the most turbulent periods in Egyptian history. Picture, if you will, ancient Egypt in the 14th century BCE, during what archaeologists call the Amarna period. The empire stretches from Nubia in the south to the Euphrates River in the north, encompassing territories that would challenge even modern nations to govern. Trade routes bring gold from African mines, precious stones from far-off lands, and exotic goods from across the Mediterranean. Egyptian culture, art, and religion influenced civilizations from Greece to Mesopotamia. But within this golden empire, a revolution is brewing, not a political one, but a spiritual upheaval that will shake the very foundations of Egyptian society. Tutankhamun's story begins with his father, though the identity of this father remains one of Egyptology's most debated mysteries. Most scholars now believe that Tutankhamun was the son of Akhenaten, the heretic pharaoh who attempted to revolutionize Egyptian religion by promoting the worship of a single deity, the Aten, represented by the solar disk. Akhenaten, whose name means beneficial to the Aten, abandoned Thebes, the traditional capital with its powerful priesthood dedicated to Ammonius-Ra, and founded an entirely new city called Akhetaten, meaning Horizon of the Aten. This city, known today as Amarna, was designed as a utopian center for his revolutionary monotheistic religion. Imagine young Tutankhamun, then called Tutankhaten, meaning living image of the Aten, growing up in this experimental city. The art from this period shows us a world unlike any other in Egyptian history. Instead of the rigid, formal poses that characterized traditional Egyptian art, Amarna period artwork depicted the royal family in intimate, naturalistic scenes. We see Akhenaten and his queen, Nefertiti, playing with their daughters under the benevolent rays of the Aten, portrayed not as distant gods but as loving parents. But this artistic and religious revolution came at a tremendous cost. The traditional priesthood, whose power had been accumulated over centuries, found themselves suddenly irrelevant. The military, accustomed to pharaohs who led them in conquest, watched as Akhenaten focused entirely on religious matters while Egypt's empire began to crumble at the edges. Letters found at Amarna revealed desperate pleas from Egyptian vassals begging for military support against invading forces, pleas that often went unanswered. It was into this world of religious revolution and political instability that Tutankhamun was born, probably around 1341 BCE. DNA analysis conducted in 2010 suggests he was indeed the son of Akhenaten, though his mother's identity remains uncertain. Some evidence points to one of Akhenaten's sisters, making Tutankhamun the product of a royal incestuous union, a practice common among Egyptian royalty to keep the bloodline pure. Young Tutankhamun would have received an education befitting a prince, though it would have been unlike that of any pharaoh before him. Instead of learning about the traditional pantheon of Egyptian gods, Amonia-Sare, Osiris, Isis, Horus, he would have been taught to worship only the Aten. He would have learned to read and write hieroglyphs, studied mathematics and astronomy, and received training in statecraft and military strategy. But underlying all of this education was the understanding that he was divinely chosen, that he carried the blood of gods and would one day rule not just Egypt, but Ma'at, the cosmic order that kept the universe in balance. The transition from prince to pharaoh came suddenly and under mysterious circumstances. Akhenaten disappears from the historical record around 1336 BCE, and the manner of his death, if indeed he died, remains unknown. There may have been a brief co-regency or the rule of an ephemeral pharaoh named Smenkhare, but by 1332 BCE, Tutankhamun had ascended to the throne of Egypt at the tender age of 9 or 10. Imagine the weight of responsibility placed upon such young shoulders. Here was a child who would be expected to rule an empire spanning 3 continents, to serve as the living embodiment of divine authority, and to make decisions that would affect millions of people. The crown that was placed upon his head was not just a symbol of earthly power, but a sacred connection to the gods themselves. But Tutankhamun would not rule alone. Behind every boy king stands a regency, and the individuals who guided young Tutankhamun's reign would play crucial roles in one of history's most dramatic religious and political reversals. Chief among these figures was Ai, an elderly courtier who had served under Akhenaten and who may have been related to the royal family. Some scholars suggest he was the father of Queen Nefertiti, making him Tutankhamun's grandfather. Even more significant was Horemheb, a powerful general who commanded the loyalty of Egypt's military. These men, along with other court officials, would guide the young pharaoh through a complete reversal of his father's religious revolution. Within the first few years of his reign, Tutankhamun would abandon Amarna and return to Thebes, restore the traditional gods to their places of honor, and change his own name from Tutankhaten to Tutankhamun, from living image of the Aten to living image of Ammonius. This wasn't simply a matter of changing religious practices. It was a complete reorganization of Egyptian society. Temples that had been closed were reopened and restored. Priests who had been displaced were recalled to service. The art and literature of the period show a conscious effort to erase the Amarna period from history, to pretend that the religious revolution had never happened. But even as he worked to restore traditional Egyptian religion and culture, Tutankhamun was still very much a product of the Amarna period. The objects found in his tomb show influences from both the traditional and revolutionary periods of Egyptian art and culture. His golden throne shows him and his queen beneath the rays of the Aten, even as other objects proclaim his devotion to Ammon-Ra. The young pharaoh married Enkhesenamun, one of Akhenaten's daughters and possibly his own sister or half-sister. Their marriage, represented in numerous artistic works found in the tomb, appears to have been genuinely affectionate, continuing the Amarna tradition of showing royal couples in intimate, loving poses rather than the formal, distant relationships typically depicted in Egyptian royal art. Despite his youth, Tutankhamun appears to have taken his royal responsibilities seriously. Inscriptions from his reign speak of military campaigns and building projects. He worked to restore Egypt's international prestige, strengthening relationships with foreign powers that had been neglected during his father's obsession with religious reform. Trade flourished again, bringing wealth back to Egypt after the economic disruptions of the Amarna period. But fate, it seems, had other plans for the boy pharaoh. After ruling for approximately 9 years, Tutankhamun died around 1323 BCE at the age of 18 or 19. The cause of his death remains one of Egyptology's greatest mysteries. Was it murder, disease, an accident? We'll explore these possibilities in detail, but for now, it's enough to know that his death was sudden and unexpected. With no surviving children to inherit the throne, Tutankhamun's death created a succession crisis. His widow, Enkhesenamun, found herself in the extraordinary position of being a young woman controlling the most powerful throne on earth. Letters found in the Hittite archives tell of her desperate attempt to maintain power by proposing marriage to a Hittite prince, an unprecedented move that speaks to the desperation of her situation. But her plans came to nothing. The Hittite prince was murdered on his way to Egypt, possibly by agents of Ai or Hormheb. Enkhesenamun was forced to marry the elderly Ai, who ruled as pharaoh for only 4 years before dying himself. Hormheb, the powerful general, then seized the throne and began a systematic campaign to erase both Akhenaten and Tutankhamun from official records, viewing them as part of a shameful period in Egyptian history. This official damnatio memoriae, or condemnation of memory, may have been exactly what saved Tutankhamun's tomb from robbery. While the tombs of more famous pharaohs like Ramesses II were targeted by ancient thieves precisely because of their occupants' renown, Tutankhamun's tomb was overlooked because his name had been systematically removed from king lists and monuments. And so the boy who had lived through one of history's greatest religious revolutions, who had ruled an empire while still a teenager, who had attempted to heal the divisions his father's reforms had created, was consigned to official oblivion. His name was chiseled off monuments, his cartouches were replaced with those of later kings, and his tomb was buried under the debris from later construction projects. For over 3,000 years, Tutankhamun slept in his hidden tomb, surrounded by treasures that would one day reveal not just the wealth of ancient Egypt, but the intimate details of a young man's life and death. The boy king who had been forgotten by his own people would eventually become the most famous pharaoh in history, his name more recognizable than those of the great conquerors and builders who had sought to erase his memory. The Valley of the Kings had been giving up its secrets for centuries, but never grudgingly. By 1922, most archaeologists believed that every tomb worth finding had already been discovered and plundered. The valley had been systematically explored for decades, and the general consensus was that any pharaoh's tomb that had survived intact was simply too much to hope for. Howard Carter was not a man easily swayed by conventional wisdom. Born in London in 1874, Carter was the son of a talented artist who specialized in painting animals. This artistic background would prove invaluable in his archaeological career, as his skills as a draftsman and his eye for detail were exceptional. But Carter was also something of an outsider in the genteel world of Victorian archaeology. He lacked the university education and social connections of many of his peers, having started his career at the age of 17 as a copyist for the Archaeological Survey of Egypt. This humble beginning might have limited another man's opportunities, but Carter possessed something that was perhaps more valuable than formal credentials: an absolutely relentless determination and an intuitive understanding of ancient Egyptian culture that bordered on the mystical. By 1907, Carter had been working in Egypt for nearly 2 decades. He had gained a reputation as both a skilled excavator and a difficult personality, meticulous to the point of obsession, demanding with his workers, and uncompromising in his methods. These traits had earned him both respect and enemies in equal measure. A confrontation with French tourists at Saqqara had even led to his temporary exile from archaeological work, forcing him to earn a living as a watercolor artist and tourist guide. It was during this low point in his career that fate intervened in the form of Lord Carnarvon. George Herbert, 5th Earl of Carnarvon, was the epitome of the wealthy English aristocrat. Born to enormous privilege, he had initially shown more interest in fast cars and horse racing than in ancient history. But a serious automobile accident in 1901 had damaged his health, and his doctors recommended he spend winters in Egypt's dry, warm climate. What began as medical necessity soon blossomed into genuine passion. Carnarvon became fascinated with Egyptology and began funding excavations, though his early efforts were largely unsuccessful. He needed someone with real expertise to guide his investments, and several colleagues recommended the temporarily unemployed Howard Carter. The partnership that began in 1907 would prove to be one of the most consequential in the history of archaeology. Carnarvon provided the funding and social connections, while Carter brought unparalleled expertise and determination. Together, they would search for the one prize that had eluded archaeologists for generations: an intact pharaoh's tomb. Their early collaborations focused on various sites in the Theban area, including the Valley of the Kings. They made several significant discoveries, including the tomb of Amenhotep I and various nobles' tombs, but the big prize, an undisturbed royal burial, continued to elude them. With each passing season, the project became more expensive and less likely to succeed. By 1922, Carnarvon was beginning to lose faith in the enterprise. He had spent 15 years and enormous sums of money with little to show for his investment beyond a collection of minor artifacts and some scholarly papers. The archaeological establishment was increasingly convinced that there was nothing left to find in the Valley of the Kings. Even Carter was beginning to have doubts, though he hid them behind his characteristic determination. But Carter had one more card to play. There was a small, roughly triangular area of the valley floor that had never been properly excavated. It lay beneath the remains of ancient workers' huts that had been built during the construction of the tomb of Ramesses VI. Previous archaeologists had avoided this area because excavating it would require dismantling these ancient structures, and because it seemed unlikely that a royal tomb would be located in such a humble area. Carter, however, had noticed something that others had missed. The location was actually quite strategic, close enough to the center of the valley to be prestigious, but hidden beneath later construction that would have concealed any evidence of a tomb entrance. If someone had wanted to hide a tomb from later robbers, this would have been an ideal location. Carnarvon was skeptical. At a meeting in 1922, he informed Carter that he was no longer willing to finance the excavations unless Carter could show real progress. Carter convinced his patron to fund one final season, focusing on this unexplored area. It was a decision that would make both men immortal. The excavation began on November 1st, 1922. Carter had hired a team of experienced Egyptian workers, many of whom had been with him for years. Among them was a young water boy named Hussein Abdul-Rasul, whose sharp eyes would play a crucial role in the discovery. For 3 days, the work proceeded routinely. The workers carefully dismantled the ancient huts and excavated the area beneath them, finding nothing more exciting than pottery fragments and limestone chips. By November 4th, Carter was beginning to fear that this area would prove as barren as so many others. But as the sun rose on November 4th, 1922, young Hussein was carrying water jars to the excavation site when he noticed something odd. A step, carved from the living rock, was emerging from beneath the sand and debris. He called his foreman, who immediately summoned Carter. What Carter saw when he arrived at the site would later be described as the most thrilling moment in the history of archaeology. There, beneath 3 feet of accumulated debris, was the top of a stone step cut into the bedrock of the valley floor. As the workers carefully cleared away more sand and rubble, more steps appeared. By the end of the day, they had uncovered 12 steps leading down to what was unmistakably the entrance to a tomb. But whose tomb was it? And had it survived intact? Carter's excitement was tempered by years of disappointment. Many tombs in the valley showed evidence of ancient robbery, and the presence of an entrance didn't guarantee that anything of value remained inside. With tremendous self-discipline, Carter ordered the stairway to be refilled and posted guards around the site. Lord Carnarvon was in England, and Carter was determined that his patron should be present for the opening of whatever lay beyond those steps. The telegram that Carter sent to Carnarvon on November 6, 1922, was a masterpiece of understatement. At last have made a wonderful discovery in the valley, a magnificent tomb with seals intact. Recovered same for your arrival. Congratulations. Carnarvon immediately booked passage to Egypt, bringing with him his daughter Lady Evelyn Herbert. The 3 weeks that passed between the discovery and Carnarvon's arrival must have been the longest of Carter's life. He could only speculate about what lay beyond those steps, about whose burial he had discovered, about whether he was about to make history or merely add another disappointment to his list of near misses. On November 23, 1922, with Carnarvon and Lady Evelyn present, Carter gave the order to clear the stairway once again. As the steps were revealed, the workers found the entrance to the tomb sealed with a mortared wall. Most tantalizingly, the wall bore the impressions of ancient seals, but seals whose cartouche was too damaged to read clearly. The next day, November 24th, would go down as one of the most famous in the history of archaeology. Carter carefully made a small hole in the upper left-hand corner of the sealed doorway and inserted a candle. As his eyes adjusted to the darkness beyond, he found himself looking into a corridor filled with rubble, but rubble that bore promising signs of antiquity. The work of clearing this corridor took several more days, but finally, on November 26th, the team reached a second sealed doorway. This one bore clearer seal impressions, and Carter's heart must have raced as he recognized the cartouche of Tutankhamun, a name that was known from a few scattered artifacts, but whose tomb had never been found. Once again, Carter made a small hole in the sealed doorway. Once again, he inserted a candle to test for foul gases. And then came the moment that has been recounted thousands of times in books, documentaries, and films, the moment when Carter first peered into the antechamber of Tutankhamun's tomb. "Can you see anything?" asked Carnarvon anxiously. Carter's response has become one of the most famous quotes in archaeology. Yes, wonderful things. What Carter saw in that flickering candlelight was a room packed with the most extraordinary collection of artifacts ever discovered in ancient Egypt. Golden couches in the form of fantastic animals, chariots decorated with gold and ivory, boxes and chests filled with precious objects, statues of gods and kings, and everywhere the gleam of gold reflecting the candle's flame. But even more significantly, the seals on this inner doorway were largely intact. Unlike virtually every other royal tomb in the valley, this one had never been completely ransacked by ancient thieves. Whatever treasures lay within had been waiting in darkness for over 3 millennia. The news of the discovery spread around the world with remarkable speed for 1922. Newspapers carried banner headlines about the tomb's discovery, and people everywhere became fascinated with the story of the boy pharaoh and his golden treasures. The discovery coincided with a post-World War I fascination with exotic cultures and luxury, and Tutankhamun's tomb seemed to offer both in abundance. But for Carter, the discovery was both the fulfillment of a lifetime's ambition and the beginning of an even more challenging phase of his career. He now faced the monumental task of properly excavating, documenting, and conserving thousands of priceless artifacts. The work would require the collaboration of specialists from around the world and would take nearly a decade to complete. The morning of November 27, 1922, dawned clear and bright over the Valley of the Kings, but for Howard Carter, the quality of the light outside mattered little. His attention was focused entirely on the artificial illumination that was about to reveal wonders that had been hidden in darkness for over 3 millennia. With electric lights now installed to supplement the flickering candles that had provided the first glimpse into the tomb, Carter and his team were finally able to see the full extent of the antechamber's treasures. What they saw defied comprehension. A room measuring approximately 12 by 26 feet, packed from floor to ceiling with the most extraordinary collection of ancient artifacts ever discovered. The scene that greeted them was both magnificent and chaotic. Unlike the orderly arrangements we might expect from museum displays, the antechamber looked as though it had been hastily packed by someone in a tremendous hurry. Objects were stacked upon one another, sometimes precariously, and it was immediately clear that ancient robbers had indeed entered the tomb, though they had been interrupted before they could complete their work. Carter's trained eye could read the story written in the arrangement, or rather, disarrangement of the objects. The tomb had been sealed, then broken into, then hastily resealed by ancient necropolis officials. The robbers had clearly been searching for small, valuable items, jewelry, precious metals, perfumes, and had pulled larger objects aside in their haste. Some items showed evidence of having been damaged during this ancient ransacking, then hastily repaired by the officials who restored order to the tomb. But what the robbers had left behind was still the most spectacular collection of ancient artifacts the world had ever seen. Dominating the room were 3 ceremonial couches, each carved in the form of fantastic animals. The first represented Amit, the crocodile-headed deity who devoured the hearts of the wicked in the afterlife. Its jaws were opened wide, revealing teeth of ivory, and its body was covered in gold leaf that still gleamed after 30 centuries. The second couch took the form of the celestial cow, sacred to Hathor, goddess of love and music. Its gentle expression seemed almost alive in the electric lights, and its golden horns curved gracefully above a face of serene beauty. The third couch was perhaps the most magnificent of all, a representation of the lioness goddess Sekhmet, with a powerful feline body rendered in exquisite detail. Every muscle, every bone structure was anatomically perfect, showing the incredible skill of ancient Egyptian craftsmen. The gold leaf that covered these couches had been applied with such precision that it appeared to be solid gold, and the subtle variations in color and texture created an almost living quality in the artificial light. These couches were not merely decorative. They served a crucial role in the ancient Egyptian funerary process, providing resting places for the deceased pharaoh's body during various stages of mummification and burial preparation. Each animal represented different aspects of divine protection: the crocodile's fierce strength, the cow's nurturing gentleness, and the lioness's royal power. Scattered throughout the room were chariots, not the simple war vehicles one might expect, but works of art worthy of a god. The gold-covered chariot that particularly caught Carter's attention was a masterpiece of both engineering and artistry. Its wheels were perfectly balanced, its axles precisely aligned, and every surface was covered with intricate decorations depicting the pharaoh's victories over Egypt's enemies. The images on these chariots told stories that historians had only dreamed of seeing. Here was Tutankhamun himself, depicted with the traditional pharaonic regalia, trampling enemies beneath his horse's hooves. The artistry was so detailed that individual facial features of foreign captives were clearly visible, providing valuable information about Egypt's international relationships during the Late Bronze Age. Among the most intriguing objects were the dozens of storage chests and boxes scattered throughout the chamber. These containers, many decorated with ivory inlays and gold fittings, held secrets that would take months to fully explore. Some contained clothing, tunics, sandals, gloves, in such perfect condition that they looked as though they had been stored yesterday rather than 3,000 years ago. Other boxes held more mysterious contents. One chest contained what appeared to be ceremonial weapons: daggers with blades so sharp they could still cut, maces with heads of hardened wood and precious metals, and bows so perfectly preserved that they retained their spring. These were not merely symbolic weapons, but functional tools that could have been used in battle, yet they were decorated with such artistry that they transcended their practical purpose. Perhaps most touching were the personal items that spoke to Tutankhamun's humanity rather than his divinity. There were board games, Senet and 20 squares, that the young pharaoh had played during his lifetime. The game pieces were carved from precious materials and decorated with gold, but their wear patterns showed that they had been actually used, not merely ceremonial. One could imagine the teenage king enjoying these games with friends or family members during quiet evenings in the palace. There were also items that seemed almost modern in their familiarity. Cosmetic containers held eye makeup that had retained its color and consistency. Mirrors of polished bronze reflected faces with the same clarity they had provided 3 millennia ago. Jewelry boxes contained earrings, rings, and necklaces of such exquisite craftsmanship that they would be treasured in any age. But beyond their immediate visual impact, these objects represented something far more significant: a complete snapshot of royal life in the 14th century BCE. Never before had archaeologists been able to examine such a comprehensive collection of artifacts from a single pharaoh's reign. Every object told part of the story of how an Egyptian king lived, died, and prepared for the afterlife. The textiles found in the antechamber were particularly revealing. Linen garments showed the incredible skill of ancient Egyptian weavers, with thread counts that rivaled modern fine fabrics. Some garments were decorated with gold thread and precious stones, while others were simple linen tunics that could have been worn by any wealthy Egyptian. The variety suggested that Tutankhamun's wardrobe included both ceremonial regalia and everyday clothing. The preservation of organic materials was extraordinary. Leather items, sandals, quivers, chariot fittings, remained supple and strong. Wooden objects retained their natural colors and even their original scents. In some containers, Carter and his team found food offerings that were still recognizable: dried fruits, nuts, and grains that had been placed in the tomb to nourish the king's spirit in the afterlife. As the team worked through the antechamber, documenting and removing each artifact, they began to understand the enormous scale of the task before them. Every item had to be photographed in position, drawn to scale, cataloged with detailed descriptions, and then carefully removed and conserved. The process was painstaking and time-consuming, but absolutely essential for preserving both the objects themselves and the archaeological information they contained. Carter's artistic training proved invaluable during this phase. His detailed drawings captured not just the appearance of each object, but also information about their construction techniques, decorative motifs, and states of preservation. These drawings would prove crucial for later scholars, as some of the more fragile artifacts deteriorated despite the best conservation efforts available at the time. The work was not without its dangers. Some objects were so fragile that they crumbled at the slightest touch. Others were chemically unstable, having been preserved by the tomb's unique environment, and began to deteriorate once exposed to different temperature and humidity conditions. Carter and his team had to develop new conservation techniques on the spot, sometimes improvising solutions to problems that had never been encountered before. As the antechamber was gradually cleared, two crucial discoveries emerged that would prove central to understanding the tomb's layout and contents. First, Carter found evidence of at least two more chambers beyond the antechamber. A sealed doorway in the north wall clearly led to additional spaces, and there were signs of another chamber to the west. Second, and perhaps most importantly, Carter found clear evidence that this was indeed the tomb of Tutankhamun and that the pharaoh's mummy was almost certainly still in the tomb, undisturbed by ancient robbers. The seals on the sealed doorways bore Tutankhamun's cartouche, and various artifacts carried inscriptions identifying them as belonging to the boy pharaoh. This last discovery was particularly significant because it meant that Carter's team was about to become the first people in over 3,000 years to look upon the face of an ancient Egyptian pharaoh. The burial chamber, when it was finally opened, would contain not just more treasures, but the physical remains of one of history's most famous rulers. But before they could proceed to the burial chamber, there was one more surprise waiting in the antechamber. Tucked away beneath one of the golden couches, Carter discovered two small coffins containing what appeared to be the mummified bodies of infants. These tiny mummies would later prove to be among the most poignant discoveries in the tomb. The remains of two stillborn daughters of Tutankhamun and Enkhesenamun, carefully mummified and buried with their father to accompany him in the afterlife. The discovery of these infant mummies added a deeply human dimension to the tomb's treasures. Here was evidence of the young royal couple's hopes for an heir, hopes that were tragically disappointed. The careful mummification of the stillborn infants and their inclusion in the pharaoh's burial goods spoke to the profound grief of parents who had lost their children and their desperate hope that the family would be reunited in the afterlife. As February 1923 approached, Carter prepared for the most momentous phase of the excavation, the opening of the burial chamber itself. The sealed doorway had been carefully examined and photographed, and every precaution had been taken to ensure that the chamber beyond would be properly documented. But no amount of preparation could have readied Carter and his team for what they were about to discover. On February 17, 1923, with a distinguished group of archaeologists, Egyptian officials, and foreign dignitaries in attendance, Carter began the careful process of dismantling the sealed doorway that separated the antechamber from the burial chamber. As the wall was gradually removed, stone by stone, the electric lights revealed a sight that took everyone's breath away. The burial chamber was almost entirely filled by an enormous golden shrine, its walls covered with intricate hieroglyphic texts and religious scenes. The shrine was so large that it left only a narrow space around its edges, and it was immediately clear that this was just the outermost of what would prove to be a series of nested shrines protecting the pharaoh's sarcophagus. The golden shrine was a masterpiece of ancient craftsmanship, its surface covered with scenes depicting Tutankhamun's journey through the afterlife. The hieroglyphic texts were excerpts from the Book of the Dead and other funerary literature, providing the pharaoh with the spells and knowledge he would need to successfully navigate the challenges of the underworld and achieve eternal life. But even more remarkable than the shrine's decoration was its sheer size and the precision of its construction. The ancient craftsmen had somehow managed to construct this enormous structure within the confines of the burial chamber, fitting it so precisely that there were only inches to spare on each side. The engineering required to accomplish this feat, given the tools and techniques available in the 14th century BCE, was truly extraordinary. The shrine was sealed with a complex system of bolts and ties, and Carter realized that opening it would require extreme care. Any damage to the shrine or its contents could result in the loss of irreplaceable archaeological information. The decision was made to photograph and document every detail of the shrine's exterior before attempting to open it. This documentation process took several months, during which Carter and his team created a complete visual record of the burial chamber and its contents. Every hieroglyphic inscription was copied, every decorative detail was recorded, and the chamber was photographed from every possible angle. The resulting archive would prove invaluable for later scholars studying the tomb and its contents. When the time finally came to open the outermost shrine, Carter and his assistants worked with infinite care. The ancient bolts were still functional after 3 millennia, and as they were slowly withdrawn, the massive doors of the shrine swung open to reveal an even more magnificent sight. Within the first shrine was a second, smaller but equally elaborate shrine, its surfaces covered with different scenes and texts. This second shrine was also sealed, and its opening revealed a third shrine, then a fourth. Each shrine was a masterpiece in its own right, and together they created a series of nested chambers that provided increasingly powerful protection for the pharaoh's remains. The innermost shrine finally revealed what everyone had been waiting to see: a magnificent stone sarcophagus carved from yellow quartzite, its lid still in place and apparently undisturbed. The sarcophagus was decorated with protective goddesses at each corner: Isis, Nephthys, Neith, and Selkut, their arms outstretched to guard the pharaoh's body. The sarcophagus itself was a work of art that rivaled anything produced in any age. The stone had been selected for its beauty and strength, and the carving was executed with a precision that would be difficult to achieve even with modern tools. The hieroglyphic inscriptions around its edges contained some of the most important religious texts of ancient Egypt, designed to ensure the pharaoh's successful transition to the afterlife. But the greatest mystery still lay ahead. What was inside the sarcophagus? Was Tutankhamun's mummy still intact after 33 centuries? And what treasures might have been buried with the young pharaoh's body? The opening of the sarcophagus lid required a complex system of pulleys and supports, as the stone lid weighed over a ton. On February 28, 1924, nearly 2 years after the initial discovery of the tomb, the lid was finally raised to reveal the most spectacular sight yet: a magnificent anthropoid coffin made of solid gold, shaped in the image of the pharaoh himself. The golden coffin was breathtaking in its beauty and craftsmanship. The face, hands, and other exposed parts were rendered with exquisite detail, showing Tutankhamun with the traditional pharaonic beard and headdress, but with facial features so individualized that they clearly represented a specific person rather than an idealized royal image. The entire surface was covered with intricate decorations in gold, precious stones, and colored glass, creating a dazzling display that seemed to glow with its own inner light. But this magnificent coffin proved to be just the first of 3 nested coffins, each one more spectacular than the last. The outermost coffin was made of gilded wood, beautifully carved and decorated but modest compared to what lay within. The middle coffin was even more elaborate, covered with gold leaf and inlaid with precious materials in complex patterns that told the story of the pharaoh's divine nature and his journey to the afterlife. The innermost coffin, however, defied all expectations. When Carter finally lifted it from the middle coffin, he discovered that it was made of solid gold and weighed an astonishing 243 pounds. This was not merely gold leaf over wood or stone, but solid gold beaten and shaped by master craftsmen into the form of the pharaoh himself. The sheer value of the gold alone would have been enormous in any age, but the artistic and historical value was beyond calculation. The face of this innermost coffin was a masterpiece of ancient portraiture. Unlike the idealized faces typically shown in pharaonic art, this representation showed clear individual characteristics that matched those found on other portraits of Tutankhamun. The eyes were inlaid with obsidian and calcite, giving them a lifelike quality that was almost unsettling in its realism. The pharaoh's hands were crossed over his chest in the traditional pose of Osiris, god of the dead, holding the crook and flail that symbolized his divine authority. But even with the opening of the innermost coffin, Carter's work was far from over. Inside lay the mummified remains of Tutankhamun himself, wrapped in linen bandages and covered with a magnificent golden funeral mask that would become one of the most famous artifacts in the world. The golden mask of Tutankhamun is perhaps the single most recognizable artifact from ancient Egypt, and seeing it for the first time in the flickering light of the burial chamber must have been an overwhelming experience. The mask was crafted from solid gold and weighed over 20 pounds, its surface decorated with lapis lazuli, carnelian, and colored glass in intricate patterns that held deep religious significance. The face of the mask combined idealized divine features with individualized human characteristics, creating a portrait that was both godlike and recognizably human. The traditional pharaonic beard was rendered in gold and lapis lazuli, while the elaborate headdress showed the protective cobra and vulture that symbolized the pharaoh's dominion over Upper and Lower Egypt. When Carter finally lifted the mask from the mummy's head on October 28, 1925, he became the first person in over 3,000 years to look upon the actual face of an ancient Egyptian pharaoh. What he saw was both fascinating and disturbing. The preserved features of a young man who had died at the height of his youth, his body showing signs of the elaborate mummification process that was designed to preserve him for eternity. The unwrapping of Tutankhamun's mummy was a painstaking process that took several days and revealed layer upon layer of linen bandages, amulets, and jewelry. The ancient embalmers had placed over 140 precious amulets within the wrappings, each one carefully positioned according to religious texts to provide magical protection for the deceased pharaoh's journey through the afterlife. Among these amulets were some of the most exquisite pieces of jewelry ever discovered. Golden fingers and toes covered the mummy's extremities, while elaborate pectorals and necklaces adorned his chest. But perhaps the most mysterious discovery was a dagger found among the wrappings, its blade made from an unusual metal that would not be identified until decades later. This dagger, with its golden hilt decorated with intricate patterns and its unusual iron blade, seemed out of place among the predominantly gold and bronze artifacts of the 14th century BCE. Iron was extremely rare in Egypt at this time, more precious than gold itself. But when modern scientists finally analyzed the blade in 2016 using X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy, they made an extraordinary discovery. The dagger was made from meteoric iron. The implications of this discovery are staggering. The ancient Egyptians had somehow obtained iron from a meteorite and had crafted it into a weapon fit for a pharaoh. This wasn't simply a matter of working with an unusual metal. It represented a sophisticated understanding of metallurgy and astronomy that we are only now beginning to appreciate. The meteoric origin of the iron explains several puzzling characteristics of the blade. Its high nickel content and unique crystalline structure are typical of iron meteorites, and its exceptional preservation after 33 centuries can be attributed to the same qualities that allowed it to survive its journey through space and its impact with Earth. But how did the ancient Egyptians know that this iron came from the heavens? And why was it considered appropriate for a pharaoh's burial? Recent research suggests that the Egyptians may have witnessed the fall of the meteorite from which the dagger was made, and that they associated meteoric iron with divine powers because of its celestial origin. The discovery of meteoric iron in Tutankhamun's tomb has opened new avenues of research into ancient Egyptian astronomy and cosmology. It suggests that the Egyptians had a more sophisticated understanding of celestial phenomena than previously thought, and that they may have actively searched for and collected meteorites for their religious and magical properties. This celestial connection extends to other aspects of the tomb as well. The alignment of the burial chamber follows specific astronomical patterns, and many of the decorative motifs reference star patterns and celestial deities. The tomb itself may have been designed as a kind of cosmic diagram, positioning the pharaoh for his journey through the star-filled afterlife described in ancient Egyptian religious texts. The mummy itself revealed other secrets that continue to puzzle researchers. CT scans conducted in 2005 showed that Tutankhamun had suffered several injuries before his death, including a broken leg and damage to his chest. Some of these injuries appear to have been sustained shortly before death, raising questions about the circumstances of the young pharaoh's demise. Was Tutankhamun murdered? The evidence is tantalizing but not conclusive. The damage to his chest could have been caused by a chariot accident, a hunting mishap, or deliberate violence. The broken leg might have become infected, leading to his death, or it could have been part of the same incident that caused the chest injuries. Adding to the mystery is the apparent haste with which the mummification was carried out. Unlike other royal mummies, Tutankhamun's body shows signs of having been mummified quickly, possibly within days of his death rather than the usual 70-day process. This suggests that his death was unexpected and that his burial had to be arranged in a hurry. The tomb itself provides additional clues about the unusual circumstances of Tutankhamun's burial. Many of the artifacts appear to have been made for other people, then hastily adapted for the young pharaoh's use. Some items bear traces of other names that have been erased and replaced with Tutankhamun's cartouche. The tomb itself may have been originally intended for someone else, possibly Nefertiti or another member of the royal family. This evidence of hasty preparation extends to the tomb's decorations as well. Unlike other royal tombs in the Valley of the Kings, which were decorated with elaborate painted scenes covering every surface, Tutankhamun's burial chamber walls show only a few hastily executed paintings. The quality of these paintings is excellent, but their limited extent suggests that there wasn't time to complete a full decorative program. But perhaps the most intriguing mystery surrounding Tutankhamun's tomb is the possibility that it contains additional chambers that have never been opened. In 2015, British Egyptologist Nicholas Reeves proposed that radar scans had detected void spaces behind the walls of the burial chamber, suggesting the presence of hidden rooms. Reeves's theory is based on careful analysis of high-resolution photographs of the burial chamber walls, which seem to show evidence of plastered-over doorways. He suggests that these doorways might lead to additional chambers, possibly containing the burial of Queen Nefertiti, whose tomb has never been found despite extensive searching. The possibility of hidden chambers in Tutankhamun's tomb has generated enormous excitement in the archaeological community and among the general public. If such chambers exist, they could contain treasures that would dwarf even the spectacular finds made by Carter's team. More importantly, they could provide crucial information about the Amarna period and the mysterious disappearance of several key figures from this era. Several attempts have been made to conclusively prove or disprove the existence of these hidden chambers. Ground-penetrating radar surveys have produced conflicting results, with some scans suggesting the presence of void spaces, while others show nothing unusual. The Egyptian Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities has been cautious about authorizing invasive investigation techniques that might damage the tomb or its contents. The debate over hidden chambers reflects a larger challenge in modern Egyptology: how to balance the desire for new discoveries with the need to preserve existing artifacts and monuments. Every investigation technique, from radar scanning to core sampling, carries some risk of damage to irreplaceable archaeological resources. Meanwhile, other mysteries surrounding the tomb continue to intrigue researchers. The significance of the various astronomical alignments built into the tomb's design is still being studied. The relationship between the objects found in the tomb and specific religious texts is revealing new information about ancient Egyptian beliefs about death and the afterlife. The tomb's famous curse has also been the subject of serious scholarly investigation, though from a very different perspective than the sensationalized media reports that followed the tomb's opening. Several members of Carter's team and Lord Carnarvon himself did die in the years following the discovery, leading to widespread speculation about supernatural retribution for disturbing the pharaoh's rest. Lord Carnarvon's death in April 1923, just 5 months after the tomb's opening, was particularly significant in establishing the curse narrative. He died of an infection following a mosquito bite, and reports claimed that all the lights in Cairo went out at the moment of his death, while his dog in England howled and died simultaneously. These stories, while almost certainly embellished or fabricated, captured the public imagination and became part of the tomb's legend. From a scientific perspective, however, the curse is easily explained by natural causes. Many of the deaths attributed to the curse were of elderly individuals or people who died years after any contact with the tomb. Lord Carnarvon himself was in poor health and died of a type of infection that was commonly fatal in the pre-antibiotic era. More interesting from an archaeological perspective are the genuine health hazards that tomb excavation can present. Ancient tombs can contain dangerous fungi, bacteria, and chemical compounds that have accumulated over centuries. Several members of Carter's team did suffer respiratory problems that may have been related to exposure to ancient organic materials and the chemicals used in conservation work. The psychological impact of working in such an extraordinary environment should also not be underestimated. The combination of enormous pressure, international attention, political complications, and the awe-inspiring nature of the discoveries may have taken a toll on some of the people involved in the excavation. But beyond these rational explanations, the curse legend reveals something important about the cultural impact of Tutankhamun's tomb. The discovery came at a time when Western civilization was grappling with the aftermath of World War I and the challenges of modernity. The idea that ancient powers might reach across millennia to punish those who disturbed sacred places resonated with people who were questioning the benefits of technological progress and scientific rationalism. The tomb's treasures also had a profound impact on art and design in the 1920s and beyond. The Art Deco movement borrowed heavily from ancient Egyptian motifs, and Tutmania influenced everything from architecture to jewelry design. The clean lines, geometric patterns, and rich materials of ancient Egyptian art seemed perfectly suited to the aesthetic sensibilities of the Jazz Age. This cultural impact has continued to the present day. Tutankhamun remains the most famous of all pharaohs, more recognizable to modern people than rulers like Ramesses II or Thutmose III, who actually accomplished much more during their reigns. The golden mask has become an icon of ancient Egypt, reproduced countless times and instantly recognizable around the world. Traveling exhibitions of Tutankhamun's treasures have consistently broken attendance records at museums worldwide. The Treasures of Tutankhamun exhibition that toured the United States in the 1970s was seen by over 8 million people and generated an unprecedented level of public interest in ancient Egypt. More recent exhibitions have continued this tradition, introducing new generations to the wonders of ancient Egyptian civilization. But perhaps the most significant ongoing impact of the tomb's discovery is its contribution to our understanding of ancient Egyptian civilization. The unprecedented preservation of organic materials has provided insights into ancient Egyptian daily life, technology, and artistic techniques that would have been impossible to obtain from other sources. The tomb's contents have revealed the sophistication of ancient Egyptian craftsmanship in materials ranging from gold and precious stones to leather, wood, and textiles. The level of detail and the quality of workmanship evident in even the smallest objects speaks to a civilization that valued excellence and had developed highly specialized craft traditions. The religious and symbolic content of the tomb's decorations and artifacts has also provided new insights into ancient Egyptian beliefs about death, the afterlife, and the divine nature of kingship. The specific combination of traditional and Amarna period elements in the tomb's contents has helped scholars better understand the religious and political upheavals of the late 18th dynasty. Modern scientific techniques continue to reveal new information about the tomb and its contents. DNA analysis has confirmed relationships between various royal mummies. CT scans have revealed construction details and hidden damage, and chemical analysis has identified the sources of various materials and the techniques used to work with them. The meteoric dagger is just one example of how modern science can uncover secrets that have been hidden for millennia. As analytical techniques continue to improve, it's likely that the tomb will yield additional surprises and insights that will further deepen our understanding of ancient Egypt. The conservation of the tomb's contents also represents an ongoing challenge and opportunity. Many of the organic materials that survived for over 3,000 years in the tomb's controlled environment began to deteriorate once they were exposed to different conditions. Developing techniques to stabilize and preserve these materials has advanced the entire field of archaeological conservation. The tomb itself faces conservation challenges as well. The influx of visitors since its discovery has changed the internal environment, introducing moisture, carbon dioxide, and other factors that could potentially damage the painted walls and remaining artifacts. Balancing public access with conservation needs is an ongoing concern for Egyptian authorities and international conservation experts. Recent efforts have focused on creating detailed digital records of the tomb and its contents, allowing researchers and the public to study and appreciate these treasures without risking damage to the originals. High-resolution photography, 3D scanning, and virtual reality technologies are creating new ways to experience and study the tomb while preserving it for future generations. The mystery of possible hidden chambers remains unresolved, representing perhaps the last great secret that Tutankhamun's tomb might reveal. Whether these chambers exist, what they might contain, and how they might be safely investigated are questions that continue to challenge archaeologists and tomb conservators. As we reflect on the century that has passed since Carter first peered into the tomb and saw wonderful things, It's clear that Tutankhamun's legacy extends far beyond the golden treasures that made him famous. The tomb has served as a bridge between ancient and modern worlds, connecting us to a civilization that flourished over 3 millennia ago, yet created art and achieved technical sophistication that still inspires wonder today. The boy king who ruled Egypt for only 9 years has achieved the immortality that he and his people so desperately sought, though not in the way they expected. Rather than living forever as a god in the Egyptian afterlife, Tutankhamun has achieved immortality in human memory, his name and image recognized by people around the world who know little else about ancient Egypt. The secrets lurking in King Tut's tomb are not just about the past. They are about our ongoing relationship with history, mystery, and the human desire to understand our place in the cosmos. Every new discovery, every solved puzzle, every answered question reveals not just information about ancient Egypt, but insights into the universal human experiences of life, death, power, love, and the search for meaning. The meteoric dagger speaks to humanity's ancient connection to the cosmos and our eternal fascination with the heavens. The hastily mummified body tells us about the fragility of life and the desperate measures people will take to preserve what they value most. The magnificent treasures reveal both the heights of human artistic achievement and the vast inequalities that have characterized human societies throughout history. The possible hidden chambers represent the tantalizing possibility that there are still great discoveries to be made, still secrets waiting to be revealed. In an age when many people feel that everything has been discovered and mapped and cataloged, Tutankhamun's tomb reminds us that mystery and wonder still exist in the world. As you drift off to sleep tonight, imagine yourself standing in that burial chamber, surrounded by golden shrines and priceless artifacts, in the presence of a pharaoh who died over 3,000 years ago, but whose story continues to captivate and inspire us. Think about the ancient craftsmen who created these masterpieces, the priests who performed the burial rituals, and the young king who was laid to rest with such a magnificent ceremony. Consider the meteorite that fell from the stars to become a dagger fit for a pharaoh, the generations of tomb robbers and archaeologists who sought these treasures, and the millions of people who have been moved by the story of the boy king and his golden tomb. Reflect on the mysteries that remain unsolved and the secrets that may yet be revealed. The Valley of the Kings continues to guard its secrets, but Tutankhamun's tomb has taught us that sometimes the greatest treasures are not gold and jewels, but knowledge and wonder and the stories that connect us to our shared human heritage. In the end, perhaps that is the greatest secret lurking in King Tut's tomb. The reminder that we are all part of a continuous human story that stretches back to the dawn of civilization and will continue long after we are gone. Sleep well, knowing that somewhere in the Egyptian desert, the golden pharaoh rests in his eternal chamber, surrounded by treasures that continue to reveal their secrets to those patient and curious enough to seek them. And perhaps, if we are very fortunate, there are still wonderful things waiting to be discovered in the darkness, ready to amaze and inspire future generations just as they have amazed and inspired us. The boy king sleeps, but his story lives on, a bridge between ancient mystery and modern wonder, between the earth and the stars, between the mortal and the eternal. And in that continuing story, we all play a part, as seekers of truth, lovers of beauty, and inheritors of the magnificent legacy of human civilization. If this journey through Tutankhamun's eternal mysteries has captivated you, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to History Bedtime Stories for more fascinating tales from the ancient world. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss our latest archaeological adventures and historical discoveries. In the comments below, let us know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is.